Your new novel, The Children's Book, has a colorful cast of characters, both children and adults. And one is Olive Wellwood, and she's the mother of many children and a successful author of children's literature. What made you want to create a character like Olive?
I always want to write about fairy stories. And it struck me that the more I read about fairy story or children's book writers, the more their relationship with their own children was ambivalent at the best, or really disastrous at the worst. I mean, there's a high incidence of suicide among the children's book writers. It's as though the writers have created this wonderful idyllic pastoral world, or world full of children doing wonderful things in the countryside, and the children are somehow excluded. I think the writers mostly wrote for the writers, and their own children are sort of wandering around the edge trying to get in. I don't think Olive Wellwood in my book is a children's story writer exactly who wanted to be a child. She's a woman who came from a very frightening working class background in the north of England and has managed to make this sort of wonderful golden age, Midsummer Night's Dream, country life with a beautiful house and a garden and all these young children running about. And she's closed something off, but it keeps creeping through into her writing.
How much do you think your childhood is behind your need to write?
Oh, I mean, I remember being able to read, and I remember thinking, I can do this. And I just started reading, and I mean, I've never stopped. I go everywhere with a book, and I went everywhere with a book. But when I was a child, I don't think modern children have these acres of boredom where they've got nothing to do. They have far too much to do in many ways. And I used simply to lie on the ground or lie on the bed or lie on the carpet with a book, and then another book, and then another book. And I had a system in Sheffield for getting out of bed with a torch or getting out of bed with a book and lying at the very place where the door opened. And if I heard anybody coming upstairs, shot back into bed and pretended to be asleep. And I must have read, you know, hundreds of books by this method. It was very uncomfortable. But it was who I was.
Well, that was a reader, but how did the writer relate to the childhood, you think?
Well, the writer, the moment the writer started reading, knew that that was what she wanted to do. She wanted to write. She wanted to make things. She wanted to write, to invent a story, to use language. And I think I must have always known I wanted to do that, but I also felt very superstitiously that you can't just go about telling people you want to be a writer, because you might be no good. And I was brought up to be very canny and cautious. And I had a sort of equal belief that I was going to have to be a bus conductor. I used to go to school on the bus every morning, and I used to look at the bus conductress, and I used to think, this is how she does it, and this is what I'm going to have to do, you know. And I would rather write a book, but how do I know I'm not going to be a bus conductor? But I did a lot of thinking about what I was going to have to do instead of writing books. And then I've been very lucky because I have written books. And it's, you know, it's a cliche, but it's a sort of wonderful thing to see a book with your name on it for the first time.
Did you feel you were taking a risk by being so determined to be a writer?
Yes, I did, because I didn't want to be a kind of... I had a supervisor for my PhD in Oxford who was Helen Gardner, and she did say, and she did believe, that any woman who devoted herself to learning, she was very scathing about the writing. She said, listen, my dear, every young woman with a good degree wants to write a novel, none of them can. I don't know how she knew this, but that's a quote. And I sort of sat there looking at her like a snake. And, but it worried me. It worried. I mean, I thought perhaps she was right. Perhaps women who really wanted to think had to live like nuns and not try to have families.
At one point you say all writers have talismanic phrases which represent to them the force, the intrinsic nature of writing. What would yours be?
Making things, I think. When Philip comes down at the beginning of this novel from the potteries on foot and into the museum to look at the candlestick, he can't really say what he wants to do, but he says he wants to make something. And I see a piece of writing not in terms of whether it will change the world, nor whether it expresses me in any way, but making a construction like a pot, something that wasn't there and now is. So I suppose my other metaphor is weaving. I do see a work as a tapestry or something done on a loom, because of the sort of continuity of all the threads sort of continuing to go through and weave in and out of each other. So those are my talismanic phrases, I think.
It's a great pleasure to talk to you again. Thank you.
Well, and you. Yes.